Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College, a program that encourages good discussion in our community on today's local and global issues. Now, your host for Conversations from St. Norbert College, author, professor, and nationally known sports economist, Dr. Kevin Quinn.
Welcome to Conversations from St. Norbert College. I'm Kevin Quinn. Our special guests are Sandy Odorzynski, professor of economics at St. Norbert College, and David Wegge, professor of political science and executive director of the St. Norbert College Strategic Research Institute. We'll discuss a recent study done by Odorzynski, which details the economic impact St. Norbert College has on the local area and how Wegge and the Strategic Research Institute at St. Norbert were involved. Welcome to the show, Dave. Welcome back.
You.
Well, I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about what was the study that you did and what did you find?
Well, thank you, Kevin. We haven't done an impact study since 1995. It's well overdue. And I had a chance to take a sabbatical leave, and the college granted me that time to reorganize my life along the lines of understanding the newer versions of impact studies. There's some in-plan software that is available now that is very sophisticated compared to previous years' types of software.
The dark ages.
Yes, exactly. And so the college committed to a study that involved this software and my use of time to gather some data. We took a look at it in a four-pronged approach. We have the operating expenditures of the college. The college is on the move in terms of its construction, and so we took a look at its construction spending in the last 5 years. We have 2,000 students, and so we looked at student spending in the local area, and then also we have a variety of visitors that march through here during the academic year. So we took a four-pronged approach.
So what did you find? Are we important?
Well, we are important. We are important. We're located in a smaller community outside Green Bay. And of course, the area is known mostly for the Packers, but the college itself is a significant employer in the community. We have 615 full and part-time employees. Those are non-student employees, and an operating budget of $60 million. And so our findings were that when all is said and done, counting the multiplier effects, that we generate more than 1,200 jobs in the local area, about $121 million of output.
$121 million. So you talked about the budget and other stuff. One of the things I noticed in what you did was the number of volunteer hours that's generated that are generated here.
Yes, when we were studying the numbers, we made a commitment to make this go beyond just the dollars and cents. Too often, economists and business people are accused of worrying only about the money, and an institution like ours has a mission-driven commitment to service to others. And so we thought it would be a nice, unique aspect of our study to include not only our dollars of spending in the local area, but also our impact in terms of service orientation.
So budget numbers are pretty easy to get if you can extract them. How do you get student spending numbers? How do you get volunteer hours? How do you get visitor information? Where does that come from?
Well, the college data came directly from our offices here. We could have used proxies for student spending, but we really wanted a better look at that. And so we asked our students to engage in a survey in April of this past year. And in that survey, we asked about their spending patterns, and we also asked about their volunteer service. So it was a sort of a two-pronged survey of our students. We also asked our students about their visitors and how often their visitors came and what kind of spending the visitors did in the local community.
And Dave, the Research Institute was the one that actually conducted those surveys, is that correct?
Right. So we did the employee survey and then the student survey. And as Sandy indicated, we wanted to find out from the students how they were spending their money, but also when they had visitors coming, how many days did they come and visit? Did they stay in hotels? What did they anticipate in terms of spending on food and other kinds of expenditures? So based upon the results of the survey, then we could project for the whole student body and also the same for the entire employee body.
So how do students spend money? I mean, we always hear college students are poor, but that's not really the case. I mean, if you look around the campus here, there's all kinds of businesses in any college campus that cater to students. How do students spend money? Mm-hmm. Maybe the parents want to know that.
Probably do.
This is primarily a residential college, but in fact, a couple hundred of our students, primarily our seniors, live off campus, and they spend more than $1 million in rent to local landlords in the area, utilities along with that as well. It seems phenomenal, but a typical full-time student at the college spends about $2,000 on goods and services here in the local area of a consumable nature. Now, at first blush, that seemed like a lot of money to me, but when you divide it up into 12 months and you take a look at a weekly expenditure, it makes sense that somebody's going to run to Walmart or Festival Foods or the local establishments for beverages and meals out, and it adds up over the 52 weeks of the year.
It one of the things that makes an impression on me in August when all the parents are sweating, moving in stuff, is that it looks like the contents of a Circuit City was looted and brought into a hotel room. College kids, before they get here, are much bigger consumers than, say, we were back in the day. And it's not surprising to see that they're continuing to do that despite all the other obligations that they have. So what surprised you when you kind of added all these numbers together, and I mean, did you get basically what you expected, or? Well,
I think the numbers surprised me because they were large, not alarmingly large, so that I wouldn't appreciate them and count them as valid, but large in the sense that I think an institution like ours is somewhat taken for granted by its employees and by the people around us. In other words, the college has been here since 1898. It's kind of expected to be here. It's expected to be successful. And I think, the news is filled in the last couple of years because of our Great Recession. The news is filled with plants leaving local communities, and local communities are devastated because for the first time they've thought about what does that factory mean to the local community. And I think we haven't spent enough time making that point about the college. It was the 1990s the last time we made these points, and so in fact we do make a big impression. We do make a big splash here in the local area, particularly in De Pere, our home community. And the area would be a little sleepier without us. So I think the surprising thing is that the numbers are there to back it up. But $121 million of impact, 1,200 jobs. That's a big number.
That is a big number. Now, you did one of these back in 1995 with, I think, with Dave, and then one before that, right?
Yeah, one in the 1980s.
So how did these numbers change, and are they reflective of the change that the college has seen during? I mean, both of you folks got here in the late 1970s, I think.
Yeah,
we've
been here a while.
I actually want to ask you some of those questions too. But how did those numbers evolve over time?
Well, when we did the last study in 1996, I did a quick inflation adjustment and discovered that the numbers now, even after inflation, are about 40% more. It doesn't surprise me because when I think back to the 1990s compared to now, we're very much bigger in terms of employee size. We're about 100 employees bigger than we were back then. And many of those jobs are in the higher level of income jobs because they're more middle management type jobs. And then also the college has made a big splash in terms of its construction expenditures. I realize that this show is seen outside of the region, but those locally would know that if you drove down 3rd Street, there's just one after another monument, if you will, to the college's recent uptick in terms of its activity, in terms of a residential hall, a brand new state-of-the-art library, a welcoming center for our new and prospective students. And a totally remodeled commons area where we dine daily. So clearly these are big moving and shaking experiences compared to, say, back 15, 20 years ago when we did our last study.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what St. Norbert College was like when you folks arrived here. You grew up in the Chicago area. You grew up in Minnesota, and we forgive you both for that. But what was it like then versus now? How did it feel different back then?
Well, physically it felt much smaller, not nearly as maybe contemporary in terms of, I remember the first parking lot I used to park in was gravel. And after I'd been here for about 2 years, it finally got paved. It was a much smaller institution in physically and in terms of students. I think when I came, enrollment was about 1,400 students. So, and that was in 1979. So, we've increased in enrollment substantially. Our facilities are far better than they were at that point in time, and things have just gotten much better, I think.
Are students a lot different, a little bit different than they were back then? I mean, the hair is shorter now, for the most part. I've seen pictures actually of both of you folks, not with students after you got here, and what struck me is how everyone is wearing the same flannel shirts and jeans in the late 1970s. But how are the students the same, and how are they different than they were back then?
Well, the passage of time clearly notes some differences. When I arrived here, I was basically old enough to be their older sister, so to speak. I was fresh out of grad school. I was in my late 20s. Now I'm old enough to be their grandmother. So, it's quite a bit different. Even if society had not changed, there would be a big difference in terms of the age gap between my students. They seem not to age. They continue to be 18 and 19 years old, and I no longer am. But on the other hand, I think another huge change is the expectation of using technology in the classroom. And folks like Dave and me, who are nearly the same age, we didn't grow up with all this technology. So we've had to sort of make sure that we stayed fresh so that we could stay current in our profession and be valid professionals. And so our students, have a much easier time with the technology and embrace the changes faster than perhaps we might. And so some of their expectations for instant gratification, instant notification, doing things electronically is happening far more today, which I applaud. At the same time, it's a learning curve for those of us who are a little bit older.
Well, I know that the software that you used for the survey didn't exist.
Oh, that's exactly
15
right.
years ago.
There's a perfect example of how technology has really brought these studies into a different era. In fact, I hesitate to even compare the results of our previous study because this study, the implant software, allows us to be specific with our multipliers and estimate our multipliers, not only on the kind of institution we are, which is higher education, but also on the local region. Now, that was not possible 25 years ago when we were doing those studies. So we were doing a more gross approach to it, basically making estimations and saying, this is good enough because that's all we have. Today, the input-output models are easily handled with the computer software because they can handle all those equations and allows us to really fine-tune these multipliers so that we really feel good that what we've got matches the reality of all the interactions that are out there in our businesses.
And Dave, it's the same thing. You do surveys. You've been doing surveys here for 30 some odd years, and I mean the technology there has changed too, right?
Well, it has tremendously. And when I first started, we were doing phone surveys, paper and pencil, but with recording the information. Now we have a computer-assisted telephone interviewing system, and so the questionnaires are right on the computer screen. Data entry is immediate. We're doing a lot of online surveys right now. So the surveys that we did for this impact study, for example, of the employees and the students, were done using online software. So the technology there has changed substantially. And then, for doing some of our political surveys, you add in things like cell phones, and that's created a whole new dimension because we have a substantial number of people, particularly in younger age groups, who are going to cell only, and they're dropping their landlines. And so if you're going to have a good representative sample of the general public, you need to make sure that you include cell phones, otherwise you're going to miss probably about 25% of that general population. So there's lots of technology changes that have really impacted the survey world over the last few years.
You're watching Conversations from St. Norbert College. Joining us are Sandy Odorzynski and David Wegge, and we're discussing an economic impact survey that you did for the college, but a little bit more than that too. And you just mentioned something about doing surveys and polling and all that sort of thing. We've just had an election. And I think that one of the great stars that emerged from this election, surprisingly enough, is a number-crunching guy by the name of Nate Silver, who takes polls and surveys that you've been doing forever and makes something of that. What's your take on that as a long-time survey researcher?
Well, he certainly was accurate in his results, and
That's a plus.
That's a plus. And well, and the other thing he's done is he's done evaluations of all the survey organizations to find out how accurate they are. And I suspect he's using that information as well to kind of make the kinds of projections, because some survey organizations tend to be much more accurate than others. And so when he puts it into his model of, what's the probability that Obama is going to win in Ohio or Florida or Virginia, I'm sure he's looking at all those poll numbers, but probably giving different weights to certain survey organizations that have a higher level of accuracy historically. Generally speaking, the polling community did a really fine job this year. I mean, it was relatively accurate. I think if you look at the poll results and you look at the 10 states that were toss-up states, I think almost all of them went the direction that the polls indicated they would be going with. And then there was some states that were kind of toss-up states that were too close to call. But I think most of the polling in the states was actually quite accurate.
Are we, there's a sense that, my phone was ringing off the hook before this election. Every time I turned around, it was 10 new polls in a day. They said different things. And not only in the political world, but also in the business world. Is there a sense that we're kind of being over-surveyed in some sense? And how does that impact the work that you do?
Well, probably most of the phone calls you got this fall were not surveys. They were probably robocalls from the candidates asking you to support that particular candidate. But I do think when we go back historically a little bit, there was an era when there was a lot of telemarketing that was going on. And with all of that telemarketing, we ended up creating the no-call lists. And those no-call lists pertain only to people who are trying to sell things. So they don't pertain to survey researchers. They don't pertain to these robo-political calls. But I do think that the general public kind of puts the robocalls and survey people in the same category with the telemarketers. And that's been a problem for the survey research community, in that the response rates have declined. And declined a fair amount. When I started the Survey Center back in the 1980s, we'd get response rates 60 to 65% of the people we'd call that we'd actually complete interviews with. Now we're down to in the neighborhood of 40%, and the national average is right in that same area. That causes a little bit of concern in terms of, okay, what's the quality of the sample, and who's responding, but more importantly, who's not responding. And so, there's a lot of statistical weighting that goes on in the sampling world to try and remedy that. We still have found telephone surveys are the most accurate of all the surveys.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of wizardry that goes into making sure that even though the people that you actually are able to get a hold of may not be a representative sample, but turning that into a representative sample. I remember looking at a survey that your folks did some years ago, and one of the first questions is, what town do you live in? And there's a whole list of towns, and one of the options is, I don't know. And I thought, these people vote too. That's right. Well, not only are there challenges in the kind of work that you do, and as an economist, as you are, I'm well aware of the fact that that our profession has come under some scrutiny in the last few years. I like to joke that the first 2 chapters of any macroeconomics textbook should be an apology.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. But, what kinds of things have you seen? You're a microeconomist, so you're off the hook here for the most part. But what kinds of changes have you seen in economics over this period of time? And do you sense that economists agree more with each other than maybe is portrayed in the media?
Boy, that's a good question. I see most of the economics content politicized heavily, and if you try to look for a balanced approach to your news, many people are going online these days. But even so, it's very difficult online to get a news feature or news piece that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have some kind of political thing behind it. It's very difficult. The best thing I've done for myself personally is to try and sample a variety of places to get my news. Whether it's public radio and then CNN and then Fox News and then this and then that, just to see, what the different spins are, and in some cases the stories are actually either not there or there in one context or another. So it speaks to the idea that I think the media owners, the media controllers have put a heavy layer of politicization on it, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's my sense too. Is that the call for objective analysis and we have a problem, let's see what possible solutions might be out there, now seems to be purely, for economic issues, purely through the lens of politics. And I don't know if it's that because you guys are really good at what you do, and so you're able to, kind of pull all that stuff. I mean, one of the things that I think came out of the recent election was that Obama's team had very sophisticated people that were looking at issue analysis piece by piece, and they would take stands on particular issues meant to drive certain, almost down to the precinct level, which is, as an economist, a little bit disconcerting, I got to say. But still, there is a call out there for people that actually want to have answers to questions that they have where they don't know the answers, and actually that's what the Strategic Research Institute does, right? I mean, people have problems and they talk to you, right?
Right. So we have clients that come to us and basically want to know information. And what we do is design studies to gather that information for them so that they can use that information to make data-driven decisions and not making decisions that maybe are not based upon important pieces of information that they need to have to make good decisions.
Right. I mean, it must be hard. I mean, Wisconsin is a very heavy manufacturing kind of environment. There's, I think 9 Fortune 500 companies in the state, but most of the state are small to medium-sized companies, and that means that there isn't always the expertise to deal with a rapidly changing environment that exists here. So, I mean, that's a real community service.
Well, I think one of the things that's gone on, especially in this particular area, is you've had businesses that have been successful with local business leaders kind of making decisions from their gut and intuition. And they've been successful at that. But now, as the economic world has become much more competitive, they're not just competing against the folks over in Minnesota or Arkansas. It's international competition. They've got to become more sophisticated. And so I think they're starting to realize, instead of making that decision based on intuitively what I think, I better have some good foundational information to make that decision. And I think even those smaller businesses are starting to realize that and looking for research.
It's hard, I would imagine, if you're somebody who started a business from scratch and you've had certain precepts that have made you successful. First of all, it must be a little humbling to have to go on the outside, but then maybe you're going to get answers that don't necessarily fit perfectly with your view of things. I mean, that must be a challenge when you present some of the data to folks and what they find.
Well, it can be, because anytime you do research, it has one of two effects. It either confirms what they knew, and they say, "Well, I knew that all along,"
and that's good research.
And then there's kind of the challenge to what they've thought all along, and that doesn't fit with what they were thinking. Well, that's great information for them. Actually, both. I mean, intuitively you maybe thought this is what's happening, and lo and behold, the data shows you were right. But then there's the challenges to that as well, or to other pieces of information that you might have thought existed but don't.
That weren't there. Well, one of the things I find kind of interesting is that while we're at a time now where consumers seem to be more positive about the economy, the business community is not so much, and we're seeing effects in investment, et cetera. What's it going to take to create more positivity in the business community so that they begin to match where consumers see things as being?
In my mind, it's about the stalemates that are happening at the political level, and things were at a standstill until this last election. Okay, now the election is over, and we're still politicizing. I think the business community is looking for compromise between the parties, the two sides playing together nicely on the playground. in order for them to understand that things are going to move forward. These stalemates only create greater uncertainty and concern on the part of business communities, because we can't afford in our dynamic economy to continue to wait 2 years or 4 years for the next business political cycle to occur. And it's time for the two political parties, I think, to make some headway, to work with budgets, to pass budgets, and to pass some legislation.
And Dave, you do a bunch of work with the local business community where you survey their attitudes, and is that pretty much what you're finding?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, we've seen a lot of uncertainty, and here in Wisconsin, we've had a gubernatorial election, then we had a recall election for the governor, and the thinking was kind of, well, if once we get past the governor's recall, we'll have a little more certainty about what's going to happen in the state. And then it was, well, now we've got a presidential election, so now we have to wait till that's over to make sure we see what's going to happen nationally. And in particular for the business community, many of them were concerned about the healthcare policy and what was going to happen with that. Now, of course, we've got the fiscal cliff issue, and once we get past that, they say, okay, now we'll have more certainty about what's going to happen. And I think we're all hoping that will be the case. I think what we've seen locally is, and I think nationally to some extent, is that businesses, when we went through that recession, scaled back. Their revenues dropped, but after they scaled back, their profits started coming back. And actually the profit margins, maybe not the margins, but the profits have been improving. And so businesses are sitting there with a lot of money on the table right now waiting for the certainty to come along, and they're kind of spring-loaded for this economy to jump forward. So I think if we can get past this fiscal cliff, we should see some economic growth take place.
Yeah, uncertainty is really cancerous to making business decisions, I think. Sandy, you had the opportunity to be in a highly uncertain business environment. You traveled to Eastern Europe during, after the wall came down, et cetera. Not that we're quite in that situation, but how did you see folks reacting there to tremendous uncertainty?
Well, I was part of a faculty team that was training teachers, basically K-12 teachers, to deliver some economic education at the pre-college level. We don't do such a good job here in the United States with that either, but anyway, our outreach was internationally, and we did start in Eastern Europe when the wall came down. And it was interesting that the younger people embraced the change, I think because they felt positioned for possible success. Older people felt threatened, and you could understand why, because they had lived under the old rules. And as the rules change rapidly, those kinds of folks would either have to find themselves retrained or, be at the mercy of their children or, whatever governmental programs might be set up for older folks. So it was a very interesting time because the younger folks embraced it. They saw it as an opportunity. The freedoms that they could sense were happening were going to unleash the creative juices of the kind of capitalism that might be able to flourish there where it had been stymied before.
So the younger people were sort of embracing the uncertainty, not calling it such, but calling it opportunity.
Sure.
And the older folks were a little bit nervous about that.
Yeah, and and it fits in with with our standard human behavior analysis, and that is that the risk takers are the young, in part maybe because of their naivete, but in part because maybe they have a longer time to recover from any errors they might make in their decisions. Where I think older folks are a little bit more conservative about their approach, and even though what they had wasn't so good, the uncertainty of the change didn't look real attractive to older folks.
I remember after the wall came down, when I was at UIC, we brought on an economist to the department who had studied, the best way to go about central planning, which turned out didn't have much of a market there. But I remember how at sea he was to try to deal with that situation, and of course we're not looking at changes anything like that here, but there's some instructiveness. I mean, we're changing our healthcare system. We're changing perhaps our retirement system. We might be fundamentally changing the way that we interact with government, and that's kind of a scary thing. And if you're, somebody who's a business leader, you're more likely to be older than younger, and maybe that's part of what's going on. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, which is too bad. But I'd like to thank you both for being here today. This is an interesting conversation. I'm fortunate to have both of you as colleagues, and so maybe we can continue the conversation over a cup of coffee or so.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
hope you've all enjoyed our show. Until next time, I'm Kevin Quinn. Best wishes for good conversations from St. Norbert College.